There's not one pitch we've learned more about over the last 3 years than the sinker. I'll be honest, when I thought of a sinker before 2020, I didn't actually know that this is how the movement is typically created. If you're interested and want to learn how to throw a good sinker, make sure to keep watching. What's up guys, my name's Chris Langin and I'm a pitching coordinator here at Driveline Baseball. In this video, we're going to discuss how to throw a sinker, specifically looking at some of the grips and cues we utilize here at Driveline Baseball. Before getting into how to throw a sinker, if you'd like further context, you can check out our introductory video on the basics of spin and movement. We also have a video recently released that looks at just the sinker variations and their movement profiles. Before we begin, one of the most important things you can note for throwing a sinker is knowing whether or not you're a good candidate for it. If you have access to a Rapsodo, one of the first things you're going to want to look at is what your four-seam fastball efficiency looks like when you naturally throw it, meaning no cues are utilized to up the efficiency and force pronation, and there's no cues suggesting you should try to cut the pitch. Just naturally, what does your four-seam fastball efficiency look like when you throw a pitch? Pitchers that project to benefit the most from switching to a sinker are the ones that have a little bit of cut at release, meaning a spin efficiency of anywhere between, say, 75 and 90%. There's pitchers that will benefit at 95%, and almost all pitchers benefit when they're under 75%. But if you're at or above that 95% mark, you may just want to stick with a four-seamer, and if you switch to a sinker, your odds of having added depth are a lot less than those pitchers who naturally get to around 85%. Pitches tagged as a sinker at the big league level have seen their ball flight metrics change the most when they have 85% or less spin efficiency. The combination of slight cut along with a one-seam or two-seam orientation leads to aerodynamics affecting the baseball and its ball flight as it goes towards the plate, and incorporates some non-magnetic movement to that fastball following release. While things like low spin and a lower arm slot does project to generally increase sinker quality, this effect, that non-magnetic movement, or commonly referred to as seam-shifted wake, is one of the most important. Moving on from the quick spiel on seam-shifted wake, let's get into sinker grips. Let's first talk about some of the grip intricacies that are especially prominent in the sinker. We've detailed this in previous videos on breaking balls. If you'd like to see the grip modifications for those pitches, make sure you check those videos out. Let's first start off with thumb position. We track this at Driveline by looking at whether or not the thumb is tucked or flat, along with utilizing 3 separate coordinates to distinguish where that thumb is on the baseball. With the four-seamer, we said those thumb positions aren't that unique. They typically are almost always under the baseball. For the sinker, we start to see a little bit of variety. We'll occasionally see sinkers that instead of having the thumb underneath the ball, they may be on the side, which we will call 25. This is actually the true side at 50, but in between basically the side of the baseball and underneath it, we will see some sinker grips like this, which maybe can help inflict a little bit of more natural cut at release for pitchers who are at that 90% spin efficiency and are trying to lurk it down towards, say, 80%. Next up, we've got ball shifts. This can be done either laterally, in the case of a four-seamer, going from, say, here to something closer to an offset grip, or it can be done through just tilting the fingers either inward or outward. These tilts inward or outward is what we more commonly see with sinkers, going from a base two-seam grip and tilting it over to more of a one-seam grip. Sinkers are pretty typical in regards to their base grip, either thrown with a one-seam or a two-seam grip, but there actually is a lot of variety in these grip intricacies we've listed above. So when you're looking for sinker grips, maybe notice some of those other things, such as whether the fingers are together, where the thumb is exactly, if it's tilted inward or outward. Those are some of the things that maybe can separate one sinker from another, rather than just looking simply at the base grip, which is typically going to be just a two-seam or something on that one-seam side. For base grips, we've obviously got the SI1, which is simply a two-seam grip, standard like this. SI2 would mean that the fingers are closer together, just like that. SI3 would mean they're widened out, just like that. For a one-seamer, we actually tag it as SI6, would be something like this. And again, most of the variety of the base grips comes from thumb positioning changes and slight shifts. For coaches and athletes who are struggling to throw a sinker, you're probably those guys who are in that 95% spin efficiency bucket. You might want to check to see if you can tilt the grip in a manner or tilt the thumb positioning, adjust something like that, to see if you can naturally create a little bit of cut at release without sacrificing ball velocity. Oftentimes, an athlete will find a comfortable grip, but they're going to need a little bit of cueing to get to that optimal movement profile they're looking for. For sinkers, a constant friendly reminder that the pitch is generally best thrown when the spin efficiency is at about 90% or lower. If you're in that 95% plus range, you're going to want to leverage cues that get you a little bit more on the outside of the ball, really just adding gyro spin. Certainly not like a slider, but you want to think basically towards that pinky side of the ball with some type of cue. Alternatively, the sinker may just not be a good pitch for you. And there's several pitchers at the big league level who are clear four-seam guys, and they don't care. They're not going to add a sinker just to say they throw another pitch. It's clearly their best weapon, and it leans into their strengths. Here's a list of cues that may be helpful in your pursuit of either teaching the sinker or throwing it yourself. Relative to other pitch types, you may have more luck just adjusting seam orientation along with thumb positioning, so all of the grip stuff, rather than getting too heavy with cues. With the breaking pitches, again, this is just my intuition, especially if you're looking at a curveball. The grip may not have as big of a role as, say, the coach saying, hey, throw that thing harder, think a little more slurve, etc. But with the sinker, you need to keep velocity on it. If you can find a seam orientation and adjust that thumb, tilt it inward or outward to get some natural cut at release, that's typically going to have the best results, just because you can't afford for velocity to go down very much with this pitch. Another example of how this can be done is simply saying, hey, apply some middle finger pressure at release as opposed to just sticking with a base grip. That might get you that optimal spin efficiency to pick up those aerodynamics and get that ball to take off after release. Once again, we mentioned this in our four-seam video, but changing the spin efficiency in a game environment is way different than doing it in a closed environment. One, you need to check the velocity. If a guy is naturally a 100% spin efficiency guy, I bet if he tries to throw a sinker at 80%, that velo is going to come down. So make sure whatever you're trying to change that pitcher towards, the velocity doesn't tank too much, and then make sure it's something they can actually do in a game, or at least make sure they're stress testing it in live ABs, because something like, hey, cut your fastball, that might work over in the pitch design lab, but if you go from the pitch design lab to a game, that feeling is going to be a lot different if that's not natural to the athlete. The sinker is really essentially thrown just like a four-seamer for most pitchers. The main difference is obviously that two-seam or one-seam orientation, along with the fact that the pitchers that benefit most on this pitch are going to have a little bit lower spin efficiency. Whereas for a four-seamer, most of those pitches become worse. Most of them become worse as that spin efficiency goes down and total movement is lost. Rather than thinking about this pitch as game planning for how to throw it, do your homework on if you're a good candidate to throw the pitch. The pitch will also be much easier to learn if you have observed tracking technology. A Rapsodo is going to show you the spin efficiency of the pitch and will let you know if you're a candidate per se, but you're going to need something like a TrackMan that's going to showcase, hey, here is the actual ball flight characteristics. You can work with a catcher or utilize your eyes as well, but at the end of the day, if this is a really important thing to you, you need to get somewhere that has observed tracking technology so you can see those exact movement values. At Driveline, we utilize the Blob to answer questions on pitch quality. The Blob gives us a stuffed summary of a pitch based on its ball flight characteristics, mainly vertical break, horizontal break, and velocity. This allows for instant feedback to the athlete and provides additional incentive and understanding to the athlete for why they should increase the spin efficiency on their four-seamer or simply switch to a sinker grip. It can also showcase the relative importance of having extra horizontal break on a sinker versus generating additional depth on the offering. And that's the basics of throwing a sinker. I appreciate everyone for following along today. We'll be back looking at changeups and splitters in our next video in this pitch type series. If you have questions, please leave comments below. The sinker is an extremely complex topic due to how the pitch is created, that being largely through aerodynamics for good ones. So we just can't cover all of that in a basic video looking at how to throw a sinker. Leave some questions below. We may have to bring out our own video diving just into that topic, non-Magnus movement on sinkers. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit the like button. And thanks for watching. We'll be back soon.